Bob, how are you feeling?
Oh, I'm good. I've just, been good for a couple weeks now, back to almost normal as far as it goes for me. So it's just, yeah, I just spent some time in the weekend up on Sonora Pass on the Pacific Crest Trail just for a little short day hike. And that's always a
Good.
good thing.
Good.
There it is. We're live.
Okay, I'm glad to hear that, Bob. Okay, we're going to start this meeting. We'll call meeting to order, and Bob will lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance.
Okay,
We can all pretend we're standing and do that old hand over the heart and do that thing.
here you go. I pledge allegiance to the flag
Flag of the United States
of America, to the republic
for
for
which it
stands,
stands, one
one
nation,
nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
All right. And we will do a roll call, please.
Vice Chair Melissa Hernandez,
Here.
Chair Jerry Penton,
Here.
Director Bob Coomber.
I'm here.
Okay. Moving on to item 4, the minutes of the April 28th, 2020 meeting of the F&A Committee. So first of all, I guess do we have any comments or any changes or corrections to the minutes?
I have no comments or changes. I'll go ahead and move the minutes.
Okay.
I'll second that.
Do we have anybody from the public who wants to speak about the minutes? And we don't. So, okay. Do we need a roll call vote? Roll call, please.
Melissa Hernandez,
Aye.
Jerry Penton,
Yeah, aye.
Bob Coomber.
Aye.
Okay, moving on to item 5, Treasurer's Report for May 2020. Is that Tamara? Think we got ahead of somebody's schedule here. So I'll
Tamara
go.
is headed up to my desk right now to do her report out. Hold on.
I don't know what I'm doing tomorrow if it doesn't work. All right, can everybody hear me?
I can hear you.
All right, I've been talking, but nobody can hear me. So presented to you is the May 2020 Treasurer's Report in terms of where our agency is with everything that's been going on. We are expecting to come in under budget this year by about 3 million, which is awesome because our revenues are expected to come in under budget by about 3 million. So that's great. In terms of cash flow, our bank accounts are healthy. We have a bunch of money that's due back to the LTF that we haven't returned, but we need to keep holding on to it because we've got some projects coming up this year that we're going to need the cash flow for. So everything's looking great. We're at 75% on expenses and revenues are at 92% as of the end of May. Any questions?
Okay, questions for Tamara about the Treasurer's Report?
If I may, color me I'm just trying to keep up with what is supporting us right now. If we're doing so well, and I do believe we are, where's our support coming from, since it's not from Ferris certainly, and how are we subsisting, I guess?
So every year we do a claim to MTC for our TDA, STA, RM2 funds. And if you have money in reserves, they send that money to you at the beginning of the year or close to the beginning of the year. STA always has a lag, but so that's where we've been. Is last year we claimed our full amount based on our budget, and they've given us almost all of that. So that's why we're ahead on revenues over expenses, even though we aren't getting any Farebox money. Farebox is only 15% of our budget. So that's kind of where we're cash-wise we're doing okay. On expenses, because of COVID, our paratransit contract is going to come in under budget by about $500,000. Our fixed route's going to come in by about $500,000 under. Our fuel taxes or fuel expenses are coming in about $500,000 under. And then because of COVID, there's some projects that had to be delayed. So when we claimed the majority of the revenues, the non-grant revenues, just our base revenues, we requested it for all those expenses to be 100%, and now they're not going to. So other than some grant funds that we won't be able to claim because the expenses aren't there for them, and of course the fare box, we're expecting the rest of our revenues. And so that's why we're gonna, even though we're coming in under budget on revenues and expenses, we're still gonna have enough to cover all the expenses.
I thank you.
Melissa, do you have any questions?
No, just, well, maybe a quick question. So if we keep seeing what we're seeing, how long until we get to the point where we're no longer going to be in an okay kind of type of format?
Well, we're looking like we're going to be okay in 2021. One, because we're getting some money from the CARES Act, which we initially estimated to be 5 million. Now it's looking like 7 million.
Oh, okay.
So extra, nice. And we've also made cuts to our expenses for 2021. So how long, those cuts are going to last kind of depends on what ridership is doing and what revenues are doing. We're feeling pretty confident through 2021. It's 2022 that we're not real sure what that's going to look like. Now, this agency has some money in reserves. So without making any changes, we could actually get through 2022 as well. But yes, at some point we're going to hit that brick wall. And so that's why we're kind of trying to prepare for it now by doing the cuts now, not waiting until, we hit that brick wall. But our agency has, over the last decade, maybe, been putting ourselves in a position for the next economic downturn. And we expected that to be a basic, economic downturn, not, the landslide that COVID was. But we were actually prepared for it. Most agencies were not. And so that's been a debate the last few years, like, hey, should we be spending that money or should we be hoarding it? And luckily for us, we held on to it more because we needed it for cash flow for some projects that are coming up. But because we did that, we've put our agency in a really good position that we're not going to have to, we're not going to be sinking for a while.
Yeah, I know that's what we try to do in Dublin. We were always preparing for the next recession. We never thought it would be something, with COVID. So yeah.
Yeah, so horrific all at once. Yeah, no, that wasn't expected, but we were prepared for it, if you technically. Yeah, so we may have to put off some capital projects and some other things when we get there, but we're not there yet. We're doing pretty well. And a huge part of that is because we reacted so quickly.
All right. Thank you.
Okay. With that, do we have anybody attending from the public who would like to speak on this matter? And I don't hear anything. So we will look for a motion.
I'll go ahead and move the treasurer's report.
I will second that then.
Okay. All in favor? Aye.
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 Oh, excuse me, we need to do a roll.
Okay.
Roll call. Melissa Hernandez,
Aye.
Jerry Penton,
Aye.
Bob Coombs.
Aye.
Okay. You get comfortable on these Zooms, you just think we're all in the same room. So of course we can just all say aye. Okay, we'll move to item 6, approval of resolution authorizing application for Lifeline Transportation Program Cycle 6 funding.
Okay, thanks. Well, Jerry, you summarized my request well in terms of the staff recommendation. This is a request that the committee recommend the board approve resolution 18/2020 to receive funding from MTC for Lifeline Transportation Program funds for continued operations of Wheels Route 14. This resolution is required for us to apply for and seek and receive the funding from MTC. Basically, MTC has been programming various funding sources through its regional Lifeline Transportation Program since 2005. The main goals of the program are to provide enhanced mobility for low-income communities in the region. The funding sources change and come and go up and down, but LAFTA has always, since the program's inception, to my knowledge, used all of its operating funding for Route 14, which has always served the North Livermore community. MTC also requires applicants to demonstrate that there's been a planning process involved in development of the project for which to receive funds. And in the case of Route 14, that underwent a really comprehensive examination in 2016 with the COA, which included extensive outreach to low-income residents of the Tri-Valley, and resulted in I would say, reconfigured and improved Route 14 that provides a one-seat ride from North Livermore to multiple important destinations like BART, Livermore Transit Center, as well as a lot of shopping and employment destinations. So MTC makes the funding available by formula to the region's operators in this cycle. This is money that MTC sets aside from the regional 5307 program. Most of that program goes to fund transit capital, but MTC does this little set aside for operating projects that meet Lifeline goals. So the amount available to LAFTA over the next 2 years is just under $95,000. We are required to provide a 50% local match. So the total funding proposed for the project over 2 years is $188,000, of which $94,000 comes from the Lifeline program itself. So in terms of next steps, if you approve the resolution, we basically forward that to MTC for concurrence in terms of programming the funding, and then LAFTA can simply apply directly to FTA to receive it. So that could happen as early as this fall. And with that, you've got staff's recommendation to refer Resolution 18-2020 to the board for approval. I'd be happy to answer your questions.
All right. Any questions?
I don't have any questions.
Me either.
Well, I'll
And
go
if
ahead and
it's-
make a
if
motion
it's-
that we accept this.
I'll second that.
Okay. Do you have some comments, Bob?
No. I was just going to say, if that was enough, I will go ahead and move to approve.
Okay. And just checking, anybody from the public online here to speak about this? Okay. Then we'll take a roll call vote, please.
Melissa Hernandez,
Aye.
Gary Penton,
Aye.
Bob Cooper.
Aye.
Okay, thank you. I mean, these are like necessary. This is how we get the funding, so totally made sense. Okay, we'll move to item 7, approval of resolution designating applicant's agent for non-state agencies to obtain federal and/or state disaster assistance funding. And I'm gonna get-
Okay, so this is mine again. It's another resolution we have to approve to get some funding. So building off of the last one. This one is for LAFTA to be able to apply for and receive a disaster assistance funding available through FEMA for expenses in relation to COVID-19. So this is declared emergency for an incident going back to January 20th. And I'm not sure this is funding that we've received before, but we are eligible to receive these funds to the best of my understanding. And so this resolution would be required for us to advance reimbursable costs to Cal OES for reimbursement from FEMA. The only main requirement is that we can't duplicate other federal fund sources such as CARES Act. So it could be for things like equipment and materials we've needed to procure above and beyond our operations and maintenance contract that CARES Act funding is going towards. So beyond that, just need your approval of the resolution or recommend that you forward it to the board for approval. And with that, I'd be happy to answer any other questions you may have on this.
Okay. Questions?
I have no questions.
No from Bob. Do we have a motion?
Nothing here. I'll move that we move it forward.
I'll second.
All right. Anybody from the public? We need that it's not Jeopardy. What is it? It's, yeah, Jeopardy music. But anyways, roll call, please.
Melissa Hernandez,
Aye.
Jerry Penton,
Aye.
Bob Cooper.
Hi.
All right. Got through those two pretty quick. We will move to item 8. And I'm wondering who's going to present this one. And that's legislative update.
That's me again. This one might not be so quick. So if you need to, sit back and get comfy, feel free. So this is partly an informational item and partly a recommended action. For the recommended action is that the committee refer a support position on what's listed in the agenda as HR2, the Invest in America Act, to the board of directors for approval. I'll note that HR2 is still HR2, but they've changed the name, and I'll cover that here in a little bit. But mainly this report is, a follow-up from April when we kind of updated you last time about what the agency's revenue forecasts were looking like for the coming year, and our commitment to follow state and federal legislative activities that would be influencing our revenue streams. So this will cover information about the new House Surface Transportation Reauthorization proposal, which was introduced earlier this month. I've also provided an update on the state budget for next fiscal year, as well as progress on programming the second round of CARES Act money for Bay Area transit operators. So I think I'll just take up the two informational pieces first and then finish up with staff's recommended action item. So starting with the regional distribution of CARES Act funding, the first tranche of funding, which was about 60% of the $1.3 billion made available to the region, was programmed by MTC in April. And earlier this month, FTA awarded LAFTA's grant for $3.5 million in operating funding. So tranche 1 is in the bag, so to speak. Along with the first tranche of CARES Act funding, MTC also established a blue ribbon task force of transit stakeholders to help guide the region's COVID-19 response and recovery and provide recommendations for programming the second and final tranche of CARES Act funding in July, which is coming right up. That's the remaining 40%, totaling about $500 million for the region. You may know Supervisor Haggerty has been working closely with regional leaders, both at MTC and on the Blue Ribbon Task Force, which Michael also serves on, to advise the task force on policies for distributing the remaining regional funds. So Tamara kind of hinted at this earlier during her treasurer's report, but it's looking right now like that's shaping up to be fairly favorable for LAFTA in terms of the regional distribution of the remaining funding. And so I don't want to put on too surprised a face, but I think we're happy with how those discussions are going so far. Michael, I don't know, you can feel free to add anything since you're on the task force and they're getting ready to take action next month, as far as I know.
Yeah, no, I think you covered it well. I was pleasantly surprised at the formula that they are using for that second tranche of money, really favorable to LAFTA.
Yeah, so maybe on that, the less said, the better. I don't know. I don't want to jinx anything. Once MTC approves the second tranche, LAFTA will be able to apply to FTA for those funds. But despite the much needed revenues coming in from the CARES Act, MTC is still forecasting a significant revenue shortfall for Bay Area transit agencies. And so they're going to continue advocacy work on securing additional federal support. And I'll touch on that when I get to discussing the Federal Surface Transportation Reauthorization and staff recommendation. So turning now from the CARES Act implementation to the state budget, I think there was a significant shortfall that had to be covered through a variety of means like spending reductions and tapping into the state's rainy day fund and other measures to produce a final state budget. The legislature is still working out details in the form of trailer bills, so to the Budget Act. But I think what you need to know in terms of transit funding is the State Transit Assistance Program, which is funded by the sales tax on diesel fuel, is expected to bring in 40% less revenue this coming year, which, while it's not great news, is at least in line with our forecasts that are included with our existing operating budget. So that's a silver lining if you want one. The flip side of that, we too have been spending less money on diesel. We have been contributing less to that fund source ourselves. So there's there's two sides of that story there too. Because the state doesn't have any additional funding to offer transit agencies, there are also some proposals in development to ease some regulatory requirements so that we basically can make existing fund sources more flexible for our use and enable transit agencies to kind of do more with less in the short term. So that kind of brings me to the update on the federal legislation. I think though, before I move on, are there any quick questions on CARES Act or the state budget so far?
Questions, anybody?
I've kind of got a lot to blow through here.
I have no questions.
Okay. So in terms of the update on federal legislation and the action item before you this afternoon, there are substantive new proposals for public transit spending to discuss there. Particularly getting back to whether they may be additional funding for public transit beyond what the CARES Act made available in March. The House already passed a proposal for another round of economic stimulus funding called the HEROES Act, which was another healthy $15 billion for public transit, which was 60% of what the CARES Act had included. So that wasn't too bad. But that bill has not been taken up by the Senate, and nobody's really talked about it since it was passed by the House. The administration recently, like yesterday, began talking about another round of stimulus, given that the CARES Act's unemployment benefits expired July 31st. So that might bring about some kind of a revived Senate proposal, kind of with that timeline in mind. But that would involve kind of additional negotiations of what should be included in another round of stimulus. And then another deal would have to be struck with the House to advance something. So with election year politics in play, it's kind of anybody's guess where that process could be headed based on in terms of the next round of stimulus. But the other major federal transportation spending proposal now in play is in the form of a new 5-year surface transportation reauthorization to succeed the FAST Act, which expires September 30th, which I actually just checked my calendar, that's in 3 months. That proposal was known until yesterday as the Invest in America Act. I'll get back to what happened yesterday in a moment. It was introduced in the House Transportation and Infrastructure Committee earlier this month, and I included a summary as attachment 1 in your packet of the bill. It's a big multimodal proposal, so I'm only, talking about the public transit provisions for this discussion. But the key thing is that up front, there's an additional $5.8 billion in additional operating funding for transit. So that's another 20% or so on top of the CARES Act funding right up front for transit to meet immediate operating needs. That touches on the issue Tamara raised about what happens in FY22, right? When our sort of current influx of revenues is, when we get beyond that horizon, right? Digging down into the longer term, it's a 5-year reauthorization totaling almost $500 billion through 2025. And the proposed spending for public transit is 72% above what was authorized in the FAST Act. So that is aligned with LAFTA's first legislative program principle to protect and enhance future transportation funding sources. There are some other beneficial provisions in the proposal, such as increased funding for bus purchases, as well as larger competitive programs for zero emission bus deployments. And both of those support LAFTA's principles to enhance operating conditions, to improve performance, and promote transit's role in addressing air quality and climate change. There's also new federal rules for mobility on demand programs to integrate new technologies with transit as a backbone, which supports LAFTA's legislative principle to enhance mobility through innovative partnerships. So that's kind of how the proposal touches on LAFTA's advocacy principles. In terms of known positions, the transit industry has come out strongly in support of the House Transportation and Infrastructure Committee proposal, with support positions being offered by both the American Public Transit Association as well as the California Transit Association. BART's board is scheduled to consider staff's recommended support position on Thursday. But that being said, the bill is far from final. Numerous amendments were included in the committee's markup session last week. And just yesterday, this is the part where I get into what happened yesterday, the bill, still known as HR2, was reintroduced as an even bigger $1.5 trillion infrastructure bill and repackaged along with housing, education, energy, healthcare, and a host of other infrastructure proposals far beyond just the surface transportation reauthorization. So it's kind of, a single set of principles that's now getting embedded into a much bigger funding proposal. But regardless, that bill will move forward, is anticipated to move forward in the House. It's now known as the Moving Forward Act. It will probably get many more amendments before it's voted on in the House sometime, if that's expected in July. So that's just on the House side. On the Senate side, there's not been much done, but there was a bill, there was a highway provision piece done by the Senate last year, but there's a bunch of other Senate committees that do all the other divisions, and none of them have really done anything yet. So it's, again, this being an election year, the politics of how a final reauthorization could come together and what mechanisms might be identified to pay for it along the way, that's really anyone's guess. But however a final bill gets advanced, we do believe these public transit provisions included in the House bill are consistent with LAFTA's legislative program principles, and that they're worth advancing and advocating for alongside our industry partners. So for these reasons, staff is recommending this committee refer a support position on HR 2, formerly known as the Invest in America Act and currently known as the Moving Forward Act, to the board for approval. And with that, I'll be happy to try to answer any questions you may have.
Okay. Any questions? Melissa, Bob?
None here.
I don't have any questions.
Okay, and I think it makes sense. It just sounds like, at least on the federal side, this can get really tangled up over the next period of time. We'll just leave it at that. So you need a motion for us to move this forward to the board for recommendation?
Yes, that staff recommendation that you forward a support position to the board for approval.
Okay, I'll move that. Do we have a second?
I'll
I'll second it.
Okay, I got 2 seconds.
We're all seconding.
We
We're all
probably don't even need the roll call, but roll call vote, please.
Melissa Hernandez,
Aye.
Jerry Penton,
Aye.
Bob Cooper.
Aye.
And just to correct myself, was there anybody from the public who wanted to speak on this? And no. Okay, thank you. Thank you for all your presentations, Jennifer. Okay. Be sure you don't have another one in there that we can cover. We've gotten through them pretty quick. I mean, we got time. I mean, we schedule the time for this, so. Okay, everybody's saying, shut up, Jerry, move on. Okay, preview, we're to item 9, preview of upcoming F&A committee items. I know yesterday, Michael, you talked about that we usually cancel July meetings. Do you think we'll need the July meeting this month or next month?
Mara, you thinking we need July?
Not right now, but based on Ms. Yeaman's report, something could happen where we need a meeting for a resolution. But right now, I don't see anything exciting coming up in terms of like year end or budget or anything like that. But there could be some need for some new funding source that jumps out at us.
Okay. So we have typically in July, we would have minutes in the treasurer's report, but I guess we could just keep the date on the schedule and Tamara can reach out to us and let us know whether it's necessary or not.
Exactly. Yeah, that's it. We got a busy summer coming up, but we shouldn't have anything that needs to go to the committee next month. So. Okay.
And then just a side note, yesterday, Michael, when we had the programs and administration meeting, programs and services meeting, we did get a chance to see the video of the SAV actually rolling down a street. So that was pretty cool. I'm looking forward to seeing that. Matters initiated by committee members, item 10.
I don't have any.
Okay.
Nor do I.
Okay. And with that, we will keep the scheduled meeting date on item 11 for July 28 until we hear otherwise. With that, we are adjourned, folks. So
Thank you.
And Michael, real quick, I haven't seen the video on that SAV shared, but I'd love to have it so I could share it myself with my own counsel and whatnot.
Yeah, that sounds great. We'll get it out this afternoon.
Okay, thanks.
Will you
Appreciate
send it to all of us?
Yeah, you bet. I'll send it to the whole board.
It'd be great. Thank you.
Thank
Okay,
you.
everybody. Thank you.
Take care.
Okay,
See
bye.
you guys. All right, bye.